What's up, guys? It's a double header of videos today. Look at me go, putting out so much content. And look at me go in fantasy. The last showdown, top 19%. Pretty darn good considering 3 of my players didn't even make it through to the playoff game, the final game. So I'm pretty happy with that. You know, I warned you guys against Falcons, so I'm glad that, you know, you followed my advice. If you didn't follow my advice, I'm not glad at you. You should have followed it because you would have done decently, you know, considering the situation. I dodged the landmine that was Falcons and everything worked out pretty darn well, which puts me in a very comfy position. Number 2 on the leaderboard. This is the best I've been early stage in the season so far. So I just want to maintain this momentum and I'm feeling good about this season. I feel like I'm on a good roll. I've had a lot of consistency in my results, which has been really good. The player I'm most worried about is probably P2. He's shown he's pretty good at fantasy, but I feel like I can catch Blair. I'm feeling pretty good about this season. So let's keep it going. We've got one of my favorite events, one of everyone's favorite events, and we've got Swiss Fantasy, which is some of the funnest that you can do. So let's dive straight on in to the major opening stage. So if you've seen my Pick'ems video, you already kind of know who I think is going to go through, who I think is not going to go through. So I'm not going to go through the particulars of the matchups and things like that. But what I'm going to say is that for fantasy, I'm going to be drafting teams from the 3-0 and 3-1 bracket. I'm not really going to even look at any of the others just because I feel it's a little bit too risky. You know, we want to be drafting teams that we expect to be in the 2-0 games, that we expect to be going 3-0, 3-1 through so that we can prioritize those padding points, right? That's key in these events. The second thing I'm going to be looking at is the opening best of ones. Because there's a lot of craziness that happens in Swiss format and with MR12 BO1s, trying to like pan out the whole journey through the round 2 and round 3, it's a little bit too tricky with fantasy. And instead, I'd rather just focus on who's going to win the opening best of ones and look at the ones that are the most likely to go a certain team's way. So for that reason, teams like Heroic and Cloud9 are really good to draft into. I think ENCE is also a good choice because of that. Eternal Fire, yes, but Mongols definitely could upset there. So even though I think the favorites are going to win all these, there are some that are a little bit more one-sided. So that's why I feel like Heroic and Cloud9 are really good teams to draft this event. Let's run through the players, the teams, who you might want to draft. ENCE, the most popular combo, or most popular picks are Glaive and Dihar, and I think at 185, Glaive is a great choice. He's been performing really consistently around a 1.0 rating, and he has a few pop-off games, which I think he's definitely is able to do here against some of the weaker teams. Similar situation with Dihar, although he's been a little inconsistent. So, you know, if he's in the best form that we see from Dihar, then expect good value for money here, but otherwise, there could be better options. It's a tough one. The other 3, I think, are just a little bit too expensive. I think there's better choices for their price points from other teams. Cloud9, I think their prices are very similar to Showdown. I think there's going to be a lot of interest in Axile at 204, but my eyes are still glued to Hobbit. I think, you know, he's been such a solid, consistent player for Cloud9 this year that he still feels like the best value for money choice here. But I think Perfecto is also a good choice if you're not wanting to splash out the cash for Electronic, although I have seen him in the top 8 most picked players, so I can see a lot of people are going heavy Cloud9. Something to consider, you might want to go a different direction so that you're not kind of following the crowd on that one. And one direction could be Xantares, who is probably poised to be the highest rated player of this stage, provided Eternal Fire make it through comfortably. There is some risk with Eternal Fire. You know, I feel that they're a team that either comes through 3-0 or struggles through 3-2. I don't think there's a middle ground for them. But I think Xantares and Mage is a cool combo. Mage is similar price to Glaive, similar performance, and I think you can make arguments for either of them. Similar with Calyx and Dihar, and I think that's a conversation I'll come back to. Vacadia as well. He's had a few rough series, but I think overall has proven himself to be a serious fragger. So I think he's a good choice around that 200 to 210 price range. Looking at Heroic, I think Nertz is again in contention for the highest rated player in this kind of bracket. He's probably also just the best player playing at this stage. Maybe him or Electronic, right? I think Tesses has been great outside of when I picked him for Showdown. That's when he completely dropped off. So as long as I'm not picking him, he's probably a good choice to pick. And then Shush, I think, is a good choice. I mean, anyone here except Nikodas is probably a good choice. Like, there's no point going Nikodas when you can get Nertz for slightly more, essentially. He's just too inconsistent. Apex, I'd be looking at Jacob and Nork. I think both of these guys are good choices. They've both been putting out really good numbers. Nork is just putting out green ratings. Like, that's all he's doing. He also has a low DPR, which means that he's not going to tank you too much if they have a bad game. Jacob has a high DPR, but he also has insane impact, and so his numbers are super high. I think that can be particularly inflated in BO1s, so there's a good chance if you went Jacob, you could have an insane draft, particularly with just the performance he's been having this year. He's single-handedly carrying them through like every series, so I think Jacob is a really good choice. I wanted to draft him. I don't, but I wanted to. I just couldn't get a draft where I felt comfortable with him in it without making serious compromises elsewhere, unfortunately. But he's a really good choice. Furia, their prices are kind of all over the mark. There's a lot of options here depending on where your budget sits. Fallen could still be a pretty good choice. There's not that many AWPers around this price point that are kind of appealing, but honestly, I don't love really picking anyone from Furia. When you consider like the Ents players are the same kind of price point, I've already made the case that I don't think Furia is going to do a lot here, so hard to justify in my eyes. Saw, if you're going for a bit of an upset draft, definitely a good choice, right? Roman at 177 is so insanely cheap. You know, considering this guy is putting up pretty insane numbers this year. I think, you know, he's similar numbers to Glaive, but he's like 8k cheaper, right? So if you believe in Saw, I think Roman paired up with any of these guys is a good choice. I'd really go Jax. I feel like he's maybe the best pairing with Roman, but there's cases for any of these players depending where your budget sits. I probably wouldn't be looking towards 9 Pandas. I mean, Glowing was fantastic during the last stage of the RMR, but yeah, I'm not feeling great about them. Mongols, obviously Senzu is an insane player, and that could be a crazy draft if you went Senzu. I mean, I believe in the Mongols, but do I believe enough to invest 215k when I could get Nuts or Electronic for about the same price? Not really. Amcal, not feeling good about them. Koi, very cheap, but again, don't feel great about them. Ecstatic, Salazar's quite cheap if you want a cheap AWPer. You know, he's shown some good numbers, so he could be good value, but a lot of people, you know, not feeling great about Ecstatic. I know I've picked them in my pick'ems, but I haven't got enough confidence to draft them. I think Imperial, we saw it Showdown. It's a different kettle of fish when you're playing Europe versus South America, but if you want to go down this direction, Henny has been great. Vinny's cheap. No Way at 192. That could be an interesting choice. So if they do come through and they play like they did at America's RMRs, there's definitely some good drafts you can make here. We're getting into crazy territory at this point. I wouldn't even be considering any of these three teams. I feel like, you know, we're talking O3 territory, so probably avoid those and stick towards the top of the table. For my draft, I'm going to stick with the formula that worked for the America's RMR and seems to be a decent way to kind of hedge your bets, which means I'm going to go 2-1-1-1 rather than a 2-2-1 draft. And I think the team that I want to double down on, I think as I mentioned, it should either be Cloud9 or Heroic just based on the opening games. I would have liked to have gone Cloud9. I think if I didn't see Electronic in the most picked players, I might have. But I think with Heroic having the easiest opening game, they're the team that I am going to double down on. And I'm going to try and ride them as my 3-0 team. So I'm going to be going pretty heavy on them. I'm going to be picking Nats, who, as I mentioned, should be one of the highest rated, if not the highest rated player of this event. I'm going to pair him up with Shush, who I think is a really good combo. I think Shush is another player that can have pop-off games. Very consistent, just a solid anchor. You can't hate Shush. He's a really good player. This feels like already a really nice pairing. Has cost me a little bit, but I still feel it's quite solid. I'm then going to tap into all of the other teams that I feel are going to end up in that 3-0 bracket. So we're going to start with Cloud9, and we're going to go with Hobbit. As I mentioned, I feel that he is the best choice on this team, just in terms of consistency. Yes, Axile might have higher highs. Yes, Boomish can have crazy games. Yes, Perfecto is a really good piece. But Hobbit has been the most consistent this year, and so he's going to remain in my drafts. I just can't stop drafting him while he continues putting up these numbers. Leaves me at 380,000, which isn't a lot. And this is where, you know, there's a few choices if you're following the same draft as me that you can go. You could go Glaive D-Har. That is a possible combo if you wanted to go 2-2-1. You can also go to Eternal Fire, and you can go Major Calyx. Another, you know, similar combo. Maybe a little bit weaker on paper, maybe not, but both of these are viable options. What I'm going to do though is split the difference. I'm not super confident on kind of either team being necessarily better than the other. And so I'm just going to hedge my bets. I'm going to go Glaive, who I think is a slightly better choice than Major in just in terms of consistency and floor of his fragging. And then going to go Calyx, who has been a really good choice for me in previous fantasy games. I think Eternal Fire, while I don't have 1,000% confidence in like going as Antara's draft, I think 195 isn't a big investment into a team that a lot of people have pegged, myself included, at potentially going 3-0. Because of that, this is going to be kind of a split draft between all the teams, the 4 teams that I think are going to be battling for the 3-0 spot. So I'm kind of guaranteeing at least half of my draft should hopefully just go through 3-0 and hopefully get me some nice padding points. So that's going to be a tradies. I just watched Dune 2, so that's going to be all of my drafts for this PGL Major are going to be Dune themed. But we start with the tradies, you know, the good guys, all the players that we think are going to farm, right? This is all favorites. There's no crazy dark horses. This is a nice, comfy draft to kick off the Major. As always, let me know who you're drafting. If you're doing anything outside the box, I always want to know kind of the risky drafts you guys are doing. Let me know how you're keeping up with me this season. And of course, good luck.